I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is a joint town council / planning commission meeting. I actually talked to Adam earlier this week, and he said that there hasn't been a joint meeting like this since 2015 or 16. So it's definitely been a while. So I appreciate everybody's attendance tonight. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Rebecca take the roll call. Rebecca, if you can do town council first and then the planning commissioners, please.
Yes, I don't have my roll sheet ready yet. Let me just improvise. Councilmember Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Mongan.
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lee.
Here.
And Mayor Casissa.
Here. And if we can just salute the flag.
Oh, did you need me to call the?
Oh, I apologize.
Sorry, I was just trying to figure out mentally what the alphabetical order would be, but
That's okay.
I'm just gonna.
A little too fast.
Okay. Commissioner Bandel is not here yet. Commissioner Bundy. Oh, let me see if he's on the attendee side. Not yet. Commissioner Rizzo.
Here.
And Vice Chair Metcalf.
Here.
And Chair Chase. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Here.
Thanks. And if we can salute the flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And again, I appreciate everybody for being here tonight. We only have one business item that we're going to cover. Staff wanted to try to get us all together and just make sure that they're on the right course with respect to the housing element. So for tonight, there's no actionable items. There's no decisions that are going to be made. They primarily are looking for feedback and input on the strategy that they've taken so far in the housing element. And that covers everything from any red flags, any gaps, anything that anybody may see that you think the planning department may need to course correct with respect to the housing element. Just a couple of quick notes. We're going to use a format standard format. We're going to have staff do the presentation. It'll come back to the planning commissioner for questions and then town council for questions. We will open it up for public comment. Then we will bring it back to the planning commissioners first and then town council for any closing comments. We are trying to wrap this meeting by 6:15 because we do have a town council meeting at 6:30. And this way it gives about a 15-minute break for staff and council members to grab a quick bite to eat and something to drink. And I want to say re-energize. So if possible, when you're either asking questions or providing comments, if you can just make them clear and concise and just try to keep them on point, and just be mindful of the time and respectful of other people's times also. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Adam and Martha.
Great, thank you so much, Mayor Casissa and members of the town council and planning commissioners. I'm just going to do a little bit of a sound check and make sure that you can all see my presentation. Can I just get a confirmation on that? Yeah, thumbs up.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, all right, great. So let's get right to it. Just to reiterate just what you said, Mayor Casissa, I just put a little slide in here just to make sure that everyone's clear on the format of the tonight's presentation and discussion. And so I won't go over that again, but really just to drill down a little bit further also from your opening comments, to be a little bit more specific about what we're actually looking for tonight is really, we want to obtain comments, concerns, and or your expression of support for staff. We hope for staff's recommended strategy to meet the town's RENA requirements for 725 housing units as part of the housing element update prior to really initiating our CEQA analysis. So what we're talking about tonight is really just one aspect of the housing element. It's called the sites inventory chapter. And this is really, it is a core component of the housing element in that we do need to identify sites and as you'll see, rezone certain sites and properties to make sure that down the road, when we develop our full housing element, we will have a compliant housing element. So we're looking for comments on the sites that we have chosen and that staff is recommending we move forward with, and also on the densities we are proposing for each site. And really, why that's critical is that this is sort of the part of the process, as you can see on this timeline, and we'll go through some of the workshops that we've done, but we're at the point in the process where we really need to begin our environmental analysis and CEQA analysis. And really the core of that work revolves around the rezoning proposals for the sites that we're selecting for the site's inventory of the housing element. So it's the environmental analysis in essence will need to know the locations at which we are going to be allowing additional residential density, and so that the analysis can actually analyze the environmental impacts of making that change as a regulatory matter. So hopefully that's clear, and you'll see on the slide we're basically we want to very quickly and hope to quickly start that environmental analysis. As many of you know, that can take some time to complete. CEQA analyses, this is already on an accelerated timeline, but we really need to have a draft housing element out this summer. And then by the end of the year, really have the CEQA analysis done so that then we can bring that before the Planning Commission and the Town Council as part of the full housing element adoption process. Oops. Let me go back here. So tonight, really, this is sort of the outline of what we want to present. We finished number one. We're going to talk just real quickly about Corte Madera's regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. I'm not going to go through too much on that just because we did talk about this in September of this last year. We went over the RHNA numbers, and obviously you're very much aware of both the council and the town council and the planning commission of the appeal that was filed unsuccessfully. But in any case, that's sort of the first part. We'll just review that real quickly. We will spend more time on number 3, the housing opportunity sites, and then actually talk about the rezoning proposal that we're recommending. We move forward in the CEQA analysis with and talk to you about the community outreach we've done, feedback we've received, and then obviously get into the rest of your questions, public comment, and then your comments. So thanks for sticking with me tonight, and just want to just acknowledge, well, we'll do this later, right? So here we are. Real quickly, the RHNA, again, as I think all of you know by now, there was a much more significant RHNA allocation to the entire Bay Area, and particularly to what were termed high resource areas, including every city in Marin County, a lot of cities in the peninsula, and Corte Madera included. And so our RHNA this time around is about 10 times higher than it was the last cycle, or the current cycle we're in, which was 2015 to 2023. We're now going to be talking about the 2023 to 2031 cycle. And so we have 725 units we need to plan for. That is broken down into planning for basically various different income categories of units. So the total is 725, but you can see only a small portion of that is really the market rate above moderate income units. And the rest are really lower and moderate income units we need to plan for. And it's really met, you're able to meet lower income requirements for saying that these sites or sites that we choose are adequate to accommodate lower income units if you zone those properties to at least 20 units an acre. And that's really the state standard. There's no other real requirements other than showing that the sites are likely to be developed over the next 8 years. This is just a slide showing the income levels. We're talking about even at these lower and moderate income levels, higher, relatively high salaries, because we're talking about our statistical area for area median income is Marin and San Francisco. And so those are high incomes, relatively speaking, even for low and very low and moderate income units. And now really what we're trying to accommodate with what we'll be talking about tonight, the 9 or the sites in our sites inventory are going to be this multifamily unit category down below. These are the units that really will form or make up the bulk of the total units that we need to provide to meet our RHNA. We also will be counting single family homes. There aren't, as you probably know, there aren't very many vacant lots to add additional single family homes. There are a few. Accessory dwelling units are also a significant source, though, of new housing units that we can count towards our RHNA as well. And those are, we believe, will be able to show that they can be broken down into the low, moderate, and above moderate income categories. But really the bulk is this multifamily unit category, which we'll be discussing at length this evening. So in terms of the housing opportunity sites, this is really understanding the context and what we needed to really do with, as we were charged really with developing a plan to meet this RHNA requirement. Staff really started to assess where are we going to look for potential opportunity sites for new housing development. And really, as we thought about this question, there were some criteria that we started to develop. And we really started with the town's general plan in 2009. However, we also had information and we listened to private property owners who over the last several years have told us they were considering property redevelopment. We also relied on our own experience in Corte Madera over the last many years, 7+ years, to survey the town and really look for sites that we believe meet our understanding of community concerns and values. And started to put together a framework for really criteria with which we could use to start to look for housing opportunity sites. And I should say we also there's some obvious sites that I think we're all aware of that are currently vacant as well. That framework really is expressed in these 5 bullet points here. And we started looking at various opportunity sites through the lens of these criteria, which was really to look for ways to limit vehicular traffic through local residential streets, meaning are there sites that are located along commercial corridors near freeways, and also in proximity to the best public transit that we have in Corte Madera. Look for areas that would minimize physical impacts to existing residential communities and neighborhoods. So are there areas that we can start to see developing outside of established residential neighborhoods? Improve the appearance, productivity, and quality of existing properties. So this was more about when you start to really look at all of the properties throughout town, there are some that potentially are, that could be redeveloped and improve improve the appearance and the opportunities for new investment and reinvestment in existing sites, and that's includes some of the sites that are currently vacant. Look for areas, commercial centers that are aging and take advantage of new retail trends and available land that currently is more devoted to surface parking. And this is a way to actually advance economic development goals as well as while we're developing new housing. And then finally, last but not least, really look for ways, look for the areas that already allow housing and multifamily housing to be developed. And that's, of course, looking to the general plan policies where actually a lot of housing is already currently allowed. And so we're going to talk about that. The next slide really just speaks to really the framework is set up for us when we look at the town's existing general plan. And it lays out the blueprint for housing opportunities really in line with what we just discussed. It was adopted in 2009 and recognized the opportunity to introduce housing in areas that previously were seen as off limits or commercial only, and change the land use policy of the town to allow a mix of commercial and residential uses near Highway 101 and major commercial corridors in some cases that were already starting to transform into mixed use areas. And that's really, you're able to see that on this general plan land use designation map. And really what we're talking about are all the areas in this turquoise color, which were prior to 2009 really designated for mostly just highway commercial uses. And most of those areas today are still remnants of that prior land use policy that the town had in place. But starting in 2009, really these turquoise areas start to become areas where we really immediately can see that they are able to, there are opportunities to really transform some of these areas into more mixed use, multifamily housing development opportunities, consistent with the town's already current land use policy, and also consistent with the other criteria that we just talked about in the framework that we use for the site inventory analysis. So I want to go through a little bit of each of these areas just to orient you, starting north to south. Going to start with this triangle area over here. And so we started to look at these turquoise areas, and I've outlined the various different sites. We're actually I'm right over here right now at the new town hall, and this image in this building right here somewhere. But again, the turquoise represents the mixed use commercial land use designation in the 2009 general plan. And you can see that we've started to identify certain sites. There's been some fairly recent redevelopment. A lot of the properties here are actually owned by one property owner who has fairly recently redeveloped this triangle site up at the corner here of the northern tip of Corte Madera. And also this is an older image, but now it's obviously a new mixed use. Well, I should call it it's a mixed commercial. It's going to be, this is obviously the council and the planning commission recently heard an application to allow veterinarian use in the ground floor of the building here. And there's an office above, and this is the Jacobic's properties. They own actually all of these sites in site 4, site 5, and this commercial property that was just developed as well. And so they had discussed, as they were developing this building, also an interest in redeveloping some of the sites, Big 5, this older medical office building. There's SF Fitness, which used to be the ice skating rink, and also this somewhat older office building as well. Additionally, we've also heard about redevelopment proposals at Site 5 in the past. The Planning Commission had a study session regarding the redevelopment of the site into a memory care facility in 2019. So we already knew that this was potentially an opportunity site, given that there's owner interest in redeveloping that property as well. This is just some images showing sort of the character. Again, some of the aging commercial properties, low intensity uses. But I forgot to mention, but also importantly, and I think some of the closest sites that we have in Corte Madera to really Larkspur Landing and the SMART train, and really served by this aging but still usable pedestrian access over the highway at this location. And then, as many of you know, there's also improving the bike ped north-south greenway over the Corte Madera Creek, leading directly over to the SMART train and Larkspur Landing Station in points north. This is the Barcelino site here. So I'm gonna have to move pretty quickly here. Again, we did the same analysis. This is Tamo Vista Corridor, Tamo Vista Boulevard. Obvious site here that we looked at was the vacant movie theater. But in addition, in looking at the backside of the Tamo Plaza, there are some older, original semi-industrial buildings that are located at the back of the office buildings, behind the office buildings here, obviously across from Tam Ridge. That was the most recent, or one of the most recent multifamily residential buildings constructed. And obviously this site is here. I'm going to start going through a little bit quicker. Again, looking at the turquoise area in along Tamalpais Drive, you can see a vacant office building, former mortuary that's been vacant for the last several years as well. This was identified as a potential opportunity site as a result. Also in this area, there's a existing, there's a proposed 3-unit apartment building actually that will be before the Planning Commission before too long. There was a study session on that as well. So it's starting to turn into a mixed use environment already. This is the site of 601 Tamalpais Drive. The village, which is not turquoise, but was also designated as a mixed use area in 2009, doesn't need much introduction. But certainly, as you start to think about larger retail trends and the way that certain sort of shopping centers and malls throughout the country and throughout Marin County is a good example with what's happening at Northgate. Macy's has been closing stores throughout the country. So you start to sort of see the potential for redevelopment of the Macy's site as potentially a really good opportunity. Given its size and also its location, potentially a significant number of units could be developed as part of a larger redevelopment proposal here. And we have started to hear interest from not only developers, housing developers, also seeing that this is reading sort of the national trends, but also Macy's itself is starting to think about reimagining what they could do with this property as well. Couple images there. Moving now south into this sort of a truly mixed use area with the car dealerships, a variety of sort of at the southern end, more light industrial uses with the Herc Rentals and some of the utilities, storage facilities. And then you have also San Clemente Place Apartments, which is Corte Madera is only 100% affordable housing development, at least until the spring when Project Home Key and the Casa Buena opens. But that's located in this area. Obviously, we've had redevelopment with the new Amy's over in this location where the Denny's was. So also heard from the property owner at this site 7 that also is considering potentially doing something different with that property in the future. And so we saw that as an opportunity to sort of provide some more infill in this location. Some photos of what's there at Paradise Drive. This is site 8. And then finally, continuing this trend with sort of looking at some of the shopping center areas and the mixed use development that's actually already occurred at the Paradise Shopping Center, with Aegis being built in the early 2000s, the Nugget Market, and then you have actually the 5 Point Fitness, a gym, which from the front doesn't look like much of a site, but actually has some depth to it behind it, and also is adjacent to 2 town-owned parcels that could make it more of an attractive development site. And some other, frankly, some other uses, but different property ownership once you start getting over into this area. But we looked at that as a potential opportunity set as well as part of this plan. And this is just an image. This is actually showing the back of the lot. You can see it extends pretty deep. And all of these sites we felt really, all of these sites really met all of these criteria and the planning framework that we laid out at the start of this process. And when we were starting to think about what are we trying to, what would be the best and most ideal sites to take advantage of for this exercise and for meeting our remit. This is just showing them all located on one map. We did have, it's not to say we didn't look at other sites, we did have alternative sites that we selected as, but for one reason or the other, they did not meet all of the criteria. I would say with the exception of Corte Madera Center, which is obviously a town-owned site, but obviously there's some existing leases. There's also some financial constraints that need to be sort of dealt with. And the feeling was really it may not be ready for consideration at this time for a housing development site. Maybe we put in some programs and policies that start to address a process that where a discussion of what actually is the best use of that site going forward is. And housing certainly may be one of the options, but there's other options I know the town is considering, and we all know that. And so perhaps it's more set up for a future housing element cycle rather than this one today that we're working on today. So with those sites, we identified 9 sites. The next step was really to go through and start to consider, we have sites, now we have to get to 725 is essentially how it works, and start to assign basically some housing densities to these sites in a way that made sense and really addressed, wasn't just sort of, coming up with a lot size and a density and trying to make the numbers work. There is some element of that, but also we wanted to address the context, the specific context of each of these sites. And so you can see sites 1, 5, and 9. We felt those were more tucked into adjacent residential areas already. They're on the edges of our 9 sites. And so those were going to be the lowest density sites, around 20 units an acre. Again, that would be the minimum we need in order to make these sites qualify for being acceptable for the lower income affordable housing categories that we need to meet in remit. Next, we looked at a step up. What could we envision for a little bit higher density? Those were sites 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8, which really are the majority of the sites that of the 9 that we looked at. And these were really within they already have larger buildings on them. They're more significant scale, generally closer to the highway, not immediately adjacent to residential development, with the exception of a couple of sites, but also just a little bit could achieve a little bit more density and scale given their existing context. And then finally, and I already alluded to this, but really the Macy's site we felt provided the greatest ability to accommodate the largest number of sites and could be the highest density, given that it was physically the most distant from existing neighborhoods and residential uses, close to the highway, large enough to really have a variety of uses and buildings, even at a more significant scale, perhaps. And then just it's more of a, with a larger physical site, you can accommodate more units, and which then alleviates some of the burden on rest of the sites to actually make up the number of units on those other sites, and allows the other sites to actually have a lower density potentially than otherwise would be needed. And so we sort of went, oops, sorry. So then we did really create a simple table with the color codes that I just talked about. On the left, you can see sites 1, 5, and 9 being the lowest density at 20 to 25 units an acre. The orange being the 30 to 35 units an acre. And these are approximate densities. And then site 6 being 40 units an acre. And that was the village, which kind of worked out in a number of ways as well. Currently, as you can see, there's a column here that says existing density. These are all general plan existing densities allowed today. And that's by the 2009 general plan allows this residential density. So site 6, you really currently, actually the village allows 300 units on the entirety of the village. And so we felt that 40 units an acre on the Macy's site comes out to about 300 units anyway. So that was a nice fit there. And as you can see, when you add all of these units, we take all of these sites at their various different lot sizes, you start to pose a density. You plug in the approximate number of units per site, and we get to a number which is 720 over here. And that certainly is greater than the 625 that I mentioned is what we were really looking for at the beginning. But there's a number of reasons why we're going above the 625. And one of the most sort of consequential, or the most, maybe the most significant, is that we're not sure really at this point that of all of these sites will really be accepted by HCD as likely to be developed in the next 8 years. And sort of we have to provide staff evidence that these sites can and will be likely to be developed in the next 8 years or decade at this point. And some may ultimately drop out. And so we want to have a buffer for that reason. We also potentially, there's some technical reasons that it's good to have a buffer above sort of the 725 of a certain percentage once and adopt a buffer of certain percentage above 725 because it allows some flexibility as actual sites get developed, or if they get developed and they don't necessarily get developed at the same, the total number of units you expected, you can sort of rejigger the unit counts at each site, and it's just a little more simple to do that. So anyways, but most importantly, we're not sure if the sites that we selected will all be remaining once we get through at HCD. So we have that buffer, but this is essentially the table that we'll show you again. We didn't want to just stop at basically a table with numbers. I'll go back. We just didn't want to stop here. We really wanted to go the extra step, not only looking at the numbers, but gaining a sense of what these densities could actually represent in terms of building size and scale at these various sites. And that was a better way to evaluate whether these density ranges were appropriate or not. And also a better way to inform our community about what might be really expected at these sites. And so we did engage Opticos. Some of you may remember Opticos was also the firm that helped the town develop its objective design and development standards. And so, for example, we had them, these are really conceptual. I want to stress that they're not proposals, but they're really were intended to be test fits. to say, all right, well, what happens if we do say 20 units an acre is allowed at 601 Tamalpais Drive? What might we really realistically expect to be developed? And so you can see in the size and scale, and so you can see that you would get probably about not only 10 units, which is what we had above, because that would be the max you can get at 20 DUs an acre, but it sort of caters itself to a townhome style development there, or a size and scale that is 2 stories, raised a little bit off the ground, because again, one of the things we'll talk about, all these sites are in the floodplain, but so the ground floor really, all but one, I think, has to be raised up a little bit. So that's why you can see some raise of the first floor. And that helps us really get a sense, all right, well, that is generally, I think, a legitimate sort of character and scale of buildings that we may actually see if we go with a 20 to 25 unit density at these sites 1, 5, and 9. Obviously, it's going to take maybe a different form. So some of these images are just meant to illustrate, again, the scale of buildings that might be reflective of that density. We did the same thing, 41 Tamil Vista Boulevard. Red is just commercial, yellow is residential, gray is parking. 30 units an acre, and so you can get 61 units. And this was important because we wanted to make sure that it actually could get sort of the number of units we were expecting while still respecting the MX1 zoning district, which the town spent quite a bit of time developing, which required lower scale buildings at the front of the site, a larger scale building at the back of the site, and the lower scale really respecting the single family homes across the street, while allowing for more intensive development at the back of the site. So that was encouraging. We did the same. This is the 2 Pfeiffer site with the big 5 over here, and the corner office building. Again, these are Jakovic's own properties, and felt comfortable that we're really talking about a scale, even with ground floor commercial, that is can be seen in areas of Corte Madera already, where you have, this is Tam Ridge, 3 stories above a ground floor commercial. San Clemente Place apartments, 3 stories above parking, some elements 2 stories above parking. This is even Meadow Street, 2 stories above parking, but a much smaller unit, a much more densely dense development, in the sense that it's a smaller unit, so you get more units to the acre there. So we do see already some of this character, and feel confident that even at 30 to 35 units an acre, this is sort of the character that we might, I should say, more the scale and mass of buildings that could be expected at that density. And then we also, of course, 40 units an acre. We do have an example of 40 units an acre. That's Tam Ridge, was developed at 40 units an acre. But with a site like Macy's, if it's integrated into really a full reimagining and complementary development with the existing village, which is what we would expect, a combination of commercial and residential uses, you might see areas with taller structures and taller buildings. This is town center, actually, with a 60-foot tall structure, maybe with some Tam Ridge style buildings surrounding or something like that. So it could theoretically have some taller buildings. This is obviously a town center. It's obviously a office building, but it has some actual residential character or feel to it. And so we actually look to, this is development at Northgate, one of their renderings. So again, not intended to show what might be developed at the village, but it is representative of sort of the idea of integrating commercial and residential on the same property, with public space, and creating more of its own community around sort of an integrated style development. And so here you see 5-story buildings, and just trying to give a sense of what might be some possibilities over at the village. I'm 40 minutes in. I'll try to, I want to make sure that we do touch on the outreach that we've done. I think this was really a critical component of, to explain to all of you how we got to what I've just described as sort of the densities and the sites that we selected. So we as you're aware, when we met with the town council in September, and then I also briefed the planning commission about the strategy and the outreach that we were going to conduct. Really, the backbone or the core component of our outreach plan revolved around this housing element workshop series, which was a series of 6 workshops. We just finished our 5th workshop February 9th last week. And it was really designed to try to engage our community in a conversation about housing in Corte Madera, especially at the beginning. We wanted people to just feel welcome, not with any sort of discussion of RENA at the outset. We wanted to let people know what the housing element was, but really try to engage our community, conversation about housing, what the needs were, what issues we should be trying to address with the housing plan, and how really housing can fit into the future vision of the community. So we had some great discussions at the beginning of this workshop series that helped identify some of the most critical housing issues and needs in Corte Madera, including, we heard this, the need for workforce housing, a mix of housing types and affordability levels. We had invited others, guests to speak, so it wasn't just staff speaking to our community. We had Brett Geitman from the Corte Madera Larkspur School District.
Hey, Adam, I don't mean to interrupt you, but can you try to wrap it up? I know the community element's important, but I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. And it seems like one thing that we need to key on is if there's any comments regarding the strategy and the direction you're moving.
Okay.
So I appreciate it. Thanks.
It's fine, actually, yeah. So I'll wait for questions on any of the outreach, but we did quite a bit of outreach. We tried to really cover our bases. This is about webpage. We've had 1,200 unique visitors to our webpage. And we've done pop-up workshops where we're out in the community trying to really engage people, not through Zoom, which was great. The 2 pop-up events. And so what we heard really was really general support for the approach that we took. And I will say one thing, we really tried to bring people along through our thought process and staff's thought process, through our framework and through the methodology, so that there's transparency and clarity about how we got to where we are tonight. We heard a lot of support. There were some for the sites. This is generally what we heard from about 60 individuals was the blue is suitable, the red is somewhat suitable. So 70–80% of our residents who responded to this survey said they were suitable or somewhat suitable, all the sites we chose. We did hear some concerns expressed on various topics, mostly traffic, sea level rise, and water resources. And that was what was expressed at the last. We responded to that at the last workshop. And I think importantly, we also really tried to say, all right, if we got this wrong, please tell us what are the sites we should choose. How else, should we raise densities here? Should we lower densities here? How should we alternatively go about meeting our RENA requirement? And we didn't get a lot of feedback or specifics about what we could do differently, which I think, and we also heard very specific comments supporting, and again, some comments concerned about trying to actually do this with respect to some of these other things on the slide. So this is, the red is just really the key rezoning proposal, which we're trying to go into our CEQA analysis with, going from the existing density to the proposed at these 9 sites. And again, this is for comments for you all to think about, is really what the purpose of tonight's workshop is, and for us to hear from you.
So with that, at this point in time, what we're going to do is go ahead and open up for questions only from anybody from the Planning Commission. One thing to note on that one slide, site 6 showed 1400 Redwood Avenue. It's actually Redwood Highway, which is the old Macy's. When I Google 1400 Redwood Avenue, it puts it way up on top of Christmas Tree Hill. So it's not Christmas Tree. Yeah, it's not Christmas Tree Hill. It's the Macy's site, just for clarification purposes. So with that, let me go ahead. Is there anybody from the Planning Commission that has questions of Adam? No questions? Okay, yeah, go ahead, James.
Thank you, Mayor Casissa. I just had a question. I thought they did a great job with the selection and putting flexibility into the plan for the new zoning. I was just curious. It seems like the big key here is connecting to the ferry and the train and some of the other public transportation. And have we had discussions with some of the transportation companies on new routes or anything like that to accommodate some of the density?
Yeah, no, I think, typically, I mean, so one thing I will say is all the Marin County jurisdictions are going through this process at the same time. So we're all planning for additional residential development. However, and so certainly, especially as we go through the CEQA analysis, that will be part of the discussion, and the transit agencies will be reviewing all of the various different housing element proposals. That said, there is TAM, the Transportation Authority of Marin is also part of that. We work with their planning manager. They're very much informed of all of our sort of challenges and efforts. But my sense is, one is there are things that are already underway, obviously with congestion management on the highways, with 580 connectors, and they're starting an analysis for that. The transit agencies are I would just say, they're going to respond more to actual development and ridership numbers and demand in some ways. But they'll also certainly be planning for additional opportunities for growth as well. I think I can't speak for them, but I'll just say they're aware, and they're going to be reviewing all of the cities and counties' work with respect to the housing element. I don't know if their actual routes will change or in what ways that might happen.
Yeah, go ahead, Margaret.
Were other services and outside agencies involved, like water and flood control, safety, fire, schools, infrastructure, when you chose the sites?
So that's part of what's going to be happening as part of the environmental analysis. This will go out to review the water, certainly in-house. We do our analysis with all of our coordinate with our partners here with the town, but with water, we brought water agency into our process. They're aware, and like I said, just with transit, same thing. They're going to be reviewing all of these various different housing element proposals through the environmental analysis, and then through comment periods, so formal comment periods. So not specifically, they're not at this point involved in the actual sort of selection process. So I would just say we're not at that stage yet where they're going to be consulted on this.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Phyllis.
I just want to make a fast statement. For those who aren't aware, this system that has been worked out by staff is unique. This is not what the other towns and the county are doing, bringing the public in with the workshops. They are presenting the things that staff has chosen, the sites, and then opening it to the public to comment about it. So I just wanted to be sure everyone was aware what we're doing is very special.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from anybody from the Planning Commission? Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and turn over to any council members with questions. Yeah, Eli, and then Bob.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Adam. I've just got a few questions here. So first, I just wanted to confirm, Adam, you said that essentially hitting a minimum density is the only thing with regards to RENA that makes a given site qualify as below, below a certain income level. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
Yes,
And then
yes.
could you speak please on the effect of SB 9 on our RENA numbers? Because it seems in principle like we've just had the vast majority of our town that's currently zoned for 1 unit per parcel now sort of non-consensually rezoned, I might say, for like somewhere between 2 and 6, unclear what the law is. But how does that factor in here?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and unfortunately, I can't provide you a good answer because we're still waiting for state guidance on exactly how they're going to factor in SB 9 into their review of our housing elements. We're not exactly sure where that's going to end up and what methodology they're going to expect us to use as part of that. So we do expect some units, we'll be able to count some units, whether it's sort of like ADUs or based on what, it's unclear. ADUs we're basing off past performance, which is sort of the guidance we've been given. And other than that, I just don't know at this point how many we're going to be able to count for us to know.
Okay, wow, that's seems like a big question mark for them to leave us with going into this, but thank you for letting us know what the situation is. Couple other questions. Do we have any sense of what % of housing units currently in Corte Madera are owned versus rental?
Yeah, I think it's about 2/3, 1/3.
Okay. And then do we have any, is there sort of like in planning, is there like an ideal ratio or are there principles of like certain ratios create certain fields in a community? Or I'm just trying to understand, how that ratio might or might not impact a community.
Sorry, can you hear me? I had to switch my battery. All right, good.
You're good.
I don't know other than sort of, I will say there's not any standard by which sort of that I'm aware of any sort of principle of like what is an ideal ratio between rental and home ownership units in a community. I think certainly it depends on sort of the values and the vision that the community has for itself and what they want to accommodate. But certainly I think we're trying through the needs assessment and through what we've been hearing is that variety is important and having different types of housing options available to people who may be seeking housing will create a more sort of holistic approach towards meeting, not diversity in terms of population, but also in terms of accommodating people doing various things in their workforce and so on. So
Sure.
if diversity is the goal, then I think you're want to.
Got it. Thank you. And then related question, it looks like at least right now, we're not at a point in this process where we're really talking about whether units that are going to be built are going to be owned versus rental. We're just talking about units, regardless, just number of units. I was just curious, is there an element in this process further down the road where the town does get to have a say in sort of how the community develops versus, basically I'm wondering if we're going to have a mechanism to really ensure a diverse housing stock.
Yes, ensure is pretty strong because ultimately it's the market forces that really need to develop the housing, but certainly there's ways to incentivize certain types of development that we may want to see. And so I think, yes, to your point, there's a whole nother part of the housing element, which includes programs and policies, which will allow us to develop and create implementation programs that may be sort of ordinances down the road or certain types of programs that we want to develop that would actually encourage or better encourage workforce housing or X types of housing.
Got it. And if that's coming later in the process, I don't want to sidetrack us tonight with that. The last question I'll ask, and thank you for the time. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how the malls are or are not being utilized in this process. I think identifying Macy's as like the big, kind of the big opportunity here is spot on. I was surprised not to see anything suggested for the rest of the village or town center. I think you mentioned that you might have said one of those already has some sort of zoning for some units. So can you just tell us a little bit about the fuller picture of the potential for housing at those two shopping centers?
Yeah, so one of the key distinctions is in 2009, the village was identified as a mixed use, basically a land use designation, meaning it allowed for housing, and 300 units was essentially permitted, at least from a policy standpoint at the village. And so it already had that sort of policy in place when we started looking for sites. To Macy's, as I talked about in the presentation, was sort of it has been we've heard from developers in the last couple of years wondering what's going on with Macy's because they're reading what's going on elsewhere, and then we've heard from Macy's themselves about reimagining and sort of thinking of a new vision for that particular parcel. So that's not the same with Macerich. That village is owned by 3 different property owners. Macy's and Nordstrom's own their own parcels, and Macerich, which owns the center parcel, and they're still mostly, they're still obviously interested in maintaining a thriving commercial center there. But they also see, and we heard from John Steckley at one of our workshops, that residential certainly could be part of that mix. The town center, we haven't, actually just recently I did hear from Monty Stevens that there may be some interest in potentially down the line looking for opportunities for housing, but it general plan doesn't allow housing there today. So it would be a land use policy change for the town center. And there weren't as readily available or readily sort of obvious opportunities for sort of transforming existing commercial center into housing the way that there was a large parcel for Macy's. We didn't, we have asked in the past about how that office space is doing, because it looks like a nice, as I mentioned, theoretically could be converted, or some other development could happen above some of the other spaces, but there has to be owner interest. And so it wasn't sort of something that just popped out of us. Certainly, again, programs and policies down the road,
Sure,
we could start that process with them if that was something
great.
we wanted to do.
Great, thank you very much. That's all I have. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Eli. Bob?
Yeah, related to Macy's. It wasn't that long ago, Macy's was one of the top sales tax generators in town from a revenue standpoint. Have we evaluated what it potentially means longer term by taking this property and rezoning it from commercial to residential from a tax revenue standpoint? Because that could potentially, hurt us. We're so sales tax dependent. Thanks.
Hey, Adam, I can take this one if you want. Yeah, so at a high level, we have in recent years, Macy's, it's changed. The fortunes have, so to speak, changed. And when you look at some of our top earners in sales tax revenue, when you look at the Village Shopping Center as a whole, brings in about $1.8 million annually to us. It's about 25 to 28% of our sales tax revenue. But specifically, the core of that comes from the Macerich owned property and the Nordstrom side. Macy's, if we were, preliminarily on some of the things that we've looked at and potential mixed use options with housing, it would be a break even or actually a revenue gainer for the town of Corte Madera. When you look at the rest of the shopping center, just strictly from a revenue standpoint, just as your town manager, I would be concerned going any farther into the Village Shopping Center. But the Macy's site is actually primed to meet multiple needs of the town. Revenue would be one of them, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Charles?
For transportation, part of the ABAG assignment was working with MTC, right, to establish what future kind of transportation needs would be. And also, I think our compliance with the RENA numbers then also qualifies us for more transportation dollars and grants, right? We rank a lot higher. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So on that, but like much smaller, a few of the sites you've identified, it seems like they would be well supported by looking at kind of understanding the traffic flows, and perhaps if in the same way that you had suggested, the town sell some lots to the developer to make it a better contiguous and larger lot. In particular, the 601 Tamalpais Drive is divided in half by a municipal street. Are you identifying like whether we could move that street, or if you're proposing Macy's, is there an understanding of better circulation and kind of rethinking our infrastructure to support these larger groups? Is that something that's determined in the EIR or later down the road, or with the actual developers, I guess, was one of the questions. And then the other one was, is that in the policies and stuff like that, with the regional transit, I know that they used to draw a big circle around it and say if you were within walking distance, there's a lot more grant funding for developers and stuff. Are we going to identify that as in those other kind of housing plans and help people understand how that could, the public-private partnerships with state entities or other entities?
Yes,
That's it.
I'll certainly, I think, working backwards on your questions, I think certainly there's an opportunity once we're in the planning phases now, but implementation, I think, of actually getting housing development built will involve and should involve, this public-private sort of helping property owners identify sources of funding, and sources of funding that the town can also take advantage of for the things also like transportation improvements, bike ped improvements, transit improvements. So kind of answering both your questions with that, but at the time there are projects, it's hard to do specific circulation improvements until you have an identified site plan and understanding access and egress from developments themselves and how that might change and what needs to change. But certainly that would be what we do at the CEQA level, environmental analysis level. We do more of a program analysis of traffic and circulation. And then at the project level, when we get a proposal, that has to then be translated into.
So, sorry, to go back to the CEQA. So final question, just to make sure we're on the right track. By picking the areas that are mixed use, and that happened in 2009, it sounded like there was already an EIR to basically identify them and change them to mixed use. Is that, and then you said like the commercial only, there hasn't been an EIR study with that. Do you think that'll fast track or make it more simplified to basically get these approved? Is that what you were alluding to?
Oh, well, certainly this analysis that we're going to be doing, it's going to pull from certain things from the 2009 EIR. I'm going to wait on sort of our CEQA consultant to be able to tell us how much they can pull from there. We don't know that right now, but that would be the next step. And then certainly if we get the housing element approved, we'll have a program environmental document that will allow projects then to be essentially streamlined for their environmental analysis. They'll be focused more on project specific issues, frankly, much like the hotel that you're going to see later tonight.
Thank you, Adam. For the sake, I think I'm going to stop asking questions.
Thanks, Charles. Any other questions from town council members? Yeah, Leela.
Thanks. Sorry, just one quick question. I know you mentioned the RENA numbers this go round were much higher than the last go round. Do we have any sense of whether that trend is going to continue? And, so is the next number going to be even bigger? And if so, is that something that you've thought about during this process, or is that too far down the line?
It's a really good question, but I can't, it's very hard to know where this goes. I think it's a complex methodology and made even more complex recently with new state legislation about how they come up with even the regional numbers, which then get filtered down to the Bay Area jurisdictions. But I think, so it's hard to say. I will say it's entered our minds a little bit. We've had a little bit of room to start to think about potential future sites such as Park Madera Center. And, I think there's potentially other sites as well that we've listed as alternatives that maybe we might have to think about next go round. But it's very hard to say what those numbers are going to be. I mean, as much as, this time around, it was really, the methodology is really based, and we're higher because of these focus on equity as a real significant criteria in the methodology, in the methodological process, or the development of the methodology for the RENA in the Bay Area. And so that really shifted more units to high resource areas than we've seen in the prior year. So sometimes, I don't know what it's going to be like in 2030 and what the focus will be on at that point. But I imagine it will still remain fairly high until housing affordability issues are sort of controlled to a certain extent. And they see some leveling of the prices increases that we see. That's speculative, but.
All right, thanks, Leila. I just have one question. Adam, how comfortable do you feel with the sites and the density numbers that you proposed?
I think we feel really like we're in a good position, and frankly, much better than some of my colleagues in other locations, in that we have sites that not only work from a RENA standpoint, but actually there's some property owners that are actually interested in creating some new housing and to meet sort of the needs that we've heard about in this process. So it's not going to happen overnight. I think, just to get back, the sites we feel good about. There's a couple of sites that we feel like we're not as on solid footing, which are the Paradise Drive Shopping Center site, just because we're not in contact with that property owner. And also the Herc rental site over there as well. Those aren't the highest numbers though. I mean, the Paradise Drive was a 20 to 25 acre site. So I think we were looking at 35 units or so on that parcel. And then the Herc rentals also was not wasn't super high in terms of its unit count, but we think there's evidence we still can provide that those are good opportunity sites to HCD, and we will be doing outreach to the owners to try to see if that's what the actual potential opportunity is. We are supposed to be looking at leases on occupied sites. These sites all have existing uses on them, with the exception of two of the vacant sites at Camel Vista Boulevard, the theater, and the mortuary on Tamalpais Drive.
All right, thanks.
We feel good.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to close it out for questions from town council and also planning commission members. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Right now we have two hands raised. One is from Mark, and I can't make out the last name. We have 3 hands raised. So with that, Rebecca, can you go ahead and bring over Mark first, and then Patty's next. And Patty, I think, did have a question in the chat, by the way.
Okay.
And we will limit public comment to 3 minutes, please.
Okay.
Okay, Mark, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
You're good.
So basically, people move to Marin and Corte Madera for its nature and a lack of congestion and the schools, and so they're not living on top of each other. And this what they're proposing is basically a 10% increase in our population. So I'm just curious, 300 units over by Macy's, that's going to be a congestion nightmare. I don't see how, you're going to have, environmental problems as well as, the otters are just coming back. I mean, there are just so many things. The schools, you've got potential for well over 700 more kids. If you figure 725 units each unit has an average of 3 people in it. One's a child. You've got 725 kids. What are you going to do? Are you going to build another school? Are you going to expand the schools that are already pretty crowded? What's the plan for that? We've got 2-lane roads going to a lot of these schools by the movie theater. How are you going to? It's already congested and hard to get around that whole area with Big Five, and then you've got the movie theater there. With all that congestion, how are you going to handle that? Are you going to build double-decker streets? I mean, our city's infrastructure cannot handle a large increase of housing like this. And I think there should be a lot of efforts. I'm sure you guys oppose this as much as I do, but I'm wondering what efforts have been to unite with other cities, not just the cities of Marin County, but throughout the state, to push back on these laws by Newsom and the other lawmakers of our state. What's being done to fight against this? Or are we just going to lay down and take what they're giving us? Or are we going to push back on this? Because, I mean, our little city of Corte Madera, I grew up in this city. I've been here for 50 plus years. And the massive changes have already, ruined much of our city, to be quite honest. But a 10% increase may not sound like a lot, but the impact on the city and the congestion that it could bring and pollution and everything else that comes with it could be devastating.
Thanks for the comments. Appreciate it.
Real quick, I mean, we're in drought situations and they want to increase our reservoirs. What's been done to our reservoirs and our water catch systems, and also with all this, I'm curious about, especially down below me where I live, the funeral home. What's the parking situation? Why?
Hey, Mark, I'm sorry. I appreciate the comments, but we're limiting them to 3 minutes, and we still have 3 other speakers from the public.
Sure.
So I appreciate your comments. And then Rebecca, can you bring over Patty? We have Patty, David, and then Pat Ravazzi.
Okay, Patty, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I had a question that I wonder if Adam might know, or maybe Todd, and that is from the last RENA go round, what percentage of the identified properties did get developed? Because these are all just identifying potential properties, and I wonder what percentage of them actually manifest as buildings. So that's one. And then in the age-friendly Corte Madera survey that was done in 2014, 95% of those over 55 own their own homes, 5% are rentals. So that's really vastly different from the rest of the town for the older people. And then the very, very old people will remember that the gravel lot was supposed to be workforce housing when they approved the village. And somehow that went bye-bye and it all got squirrely, and I never did understand it. But I wondered if that was ever going to be considered for housing again. And then the question about the fill for Macy's lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Appreciate it. Rebecca, if you can bring over David, and then we have Pat.
I'm not sure if Adam saw Patty's question that she was referring to at the end of those 2 questions. She typed it into the chat. David, I am unmuting you. You should be able to speak.
Yes. Yes. Hello, everyone. Got me?
Yep, you're good.
Hey, hello, David Bell. I think most of you know me. I'm on the flood board. I'm very, very pro town council and Corte Madera. Thumbs up to everyone. 3 main points. I found the survey a little curious when it was called. Everyone was asked to see if it was suitable. Was it suitable for you or me or residents? I don't think it's suitable for housing to be at Macy's where you're subject to 24/7 road noise. But That's just my personal opinion. Second I think Adam addressed it, I think briefly at the end. I believe it's sites 7 and 8, the light industry. Were those industries involved in this poll? Were they asked to provide input if they wanted to be part of residential housing? I ask because I'm personally, I take myself, I use the kennel, the automobile tire service over there, the dog kennel. I use those services. If they are forced to move or change in any way, I, as a resident, will be a little bit disappointed. Third, I'm wondering if the council is planning for failure. Are we going to be able to meet this? I think this addresses previous comments. These objectives are probably unattainable. So what is the alternative if we don't meet them? That's it. Thank you, council and your team.
Thanks, David. If we can bring over Pat now, and I think she's the last one with the hand raised.
Pat, you should be able to unmute.
Thanks very much. I would just like to say that I sat through all 5 of the workshops, and I was so impressed with the quality of input from our community that I would really like to echo something that I think Eli was sort of initiating on a couple of occasions, and that is to continue this process onward now with some kind of citizens group. I know we're a small town, we don't have a big community development department, but you've got a lot of resources in the community, and there's some really great ideas floating around right now about getting things for the community in exchange for approval of some denser than we would really like to see housing tracts. And I think Corte Madera also, if it wants to correct a real, I think, serious housing imbalance, go back to what Patty said. Residents 55 plus here own their own homes. And there's a whole lot of us up in the hills who would love to move down into nice senior designated housing if it existed. And then we would be freeing up our larger family homes for the families with children to come back. But right now, we really don't have anywhere to go if we want to stay in town. So senior housing, workforce housing, maybe some mini homes as a homeless solution. These are things that if you put a really good community task force together, I think we could do some great things in Corte Madera. We can get some great silver linings out of this whole impetus going on right now. So thank you all very much. Great work, everybody, and keep it going. Let's just make this the beginning of a process, not the end of one. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. I don't see any more hands raised. Rebecca, did we get any emails in?
Let me check. It closed, or I closed it, one or the other. While I open that back up again, I just wanted to add, for anyone who's joining the town council meeting early that begins at 6:30 p.m. You're joining a meeting in progress that is a special joint meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council and the Corte Madera Planning Commission. So if you are confused,
Dinner's ready.
That is it. And,
Thanks, Pat.
Let's see. No, there were no emailed public comments received regarding this item.
Thanks. And with that, I'll go ahead and close public comment. Just because we're going to bump up, we're running out of time, we're going to bump up against the town council meeting. Adam, on the people that spoke and had questions, can you get back to them offline? I'm pretty sure you recognize most of the names. That'd be appreciative. And with that, let me bring it back first to the Planning Commission for any comments, input to Adam and his team.
I think that this is a fabulous effort by Adam and staff, that it's very well orchestrated, it's very concise, and if the community hasn't been involved in it, they have missed out some great stuff, and there's a lot of information to be had, which would preclude a lot of these questions that we get in public comment. It would be helpful if everybody was tuned in, because the information is all there, and it's a great job that they've done. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else from the Planning Commission? Okay, is there anyone from Town Council that wants to provide input, comments? Yeah, Eli, go ahead.
Thanks, Fred. I'll just say for my part, I can definitely endorse this site inventory. Great job, Adam, to you and your team. I know you guys worked really hard on this. Thanks to all the residents that participated, and thank you guys for doing such a good job of engaging the community. I think that was key. And as Pat said, I'd love to see that engagement continue through the completion of the site inventory and to continue throughout the duration of this process. Thank you.
Anybody else from Town Council? Yeah, Bob, and then Charles.
Just real quickly, this was an impossible task. I agree. You guys did a great job figuring it out. Great job getting community feedback. We're going to need more. The only concern I have, I echoed earlier, is about losing the Macy's site for commercial, because I'm concerned it limits future potential commercial development there. I mean, 10 years ago, we didn't have a Tesla. We didn't have an Apple. Who knows what we may have in 10 years. And if we're giving up that space for residential, we could be foregoing potential future sales tax possibilities. Thanks.
Welcome. Charles.
Yeah, as I've talked to Adam in the past of trying to understand the RENA numbers, and I was scared to death by the amount that they were going to give us. And I think that ultimately I didn't participate, but I listened into the workshops, and I think he helped calm a lot of my fears and answer a lot of the questions and do a really good job of understanding what's being imposed on us and how our community can best benefit from it, and try to make the best of what's being required for us. And so I see this as a really good tool and a really good kind of all around effort to engage all kinds of different stakeholders, landowners, leasers, everybody, to understand future development possibilities asked for by the state. So I would recommend that if you have any issues moving forward, please reach out to the council and to Planning Commission more to help you in the process, as it is a community thing and it is something that we are required to do. So thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Leila.
Thanks. Yeah, just quickly wanted to add my support for the process as you've done it. There's a lot of factors here to balance. I sure couldn't do it, but I appreciate all the effort and work that you guys have put in to try to figure this out. I really like the community engagement piece and all the work you've done on that. I've gone back and watched a lot of the workshops as well. And especially love that you're trying to think of ways to reach people who can't come to an evening meeting. I love the pop-ups. One thing about the pop-ups, I don't know if you're publicizing those in advance, but if people might be able to know that they could go to that instead of an evening meeting, I think that would be great. Thanks.
Thanks. And just for me, again, I think I'm just going to kind of summarize pretty much what everybody says. I think we all really appreciate, Adam, all the hard work you've done on this. I think the strategic approach you have taken is right on target. It's totally logical. It's very progressive also. I call it building blocks, where hopefully in a year from now, we'll be at the top of the pyramid, which will be the actual plan that will get approved. I think you're doing a great job with the community outreach. You're using multiple channels, including digital marquee. I think you set up at farmers markets a couple of times. And I like that you're doing the surveys within the workshops, because I think that gives you a barometer of what people are thinking and where they're headed for. So again, I just think you're marching in the right direction. And with that, if there's no other comments, before I adjourn, I want to thank all the Planning Commission members and the Town Council members. I think this has been really beneficial. I think for all of us, from the standpoint of getting to kind of know each other, even though we're on Zoom, and also for Adam, because it gives him direction and knowing that he's on target and he's moving in the right way. We are looking at sometime this year doing a few more of these. It may be more on specific issues. I know one issue has come up about EV charging stations. So look for that down the road. We're not going to do them every month, but we will be doing these periodically. So with that, I just again want to thank everybody for attending. I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And just a reminder, we have 6 minutes before the Town Council meeting. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks. And thanks, Adam.
Thanks to all of you as well. Thank you.